Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. Have you ever felt like no matter how much you do, your wife does not see it? You're waiting around for her to notice, but she doesn't, and it leaves you frustrated and resentful and wondering if you will ever feel appreciated. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and this is episode 20, Stop Waiting for Your Wife to Notice You. Today we're talking about unspoken expectations, why they're so destructive, how they quietly eat away at your connection, and what you can do to break the cycle. You know what comes up over and over again when I'm talking to men? This sense of waiting to be noticed. And it sounds like, I work hard, I provide, I show up. Why doesn't she ever see it? I just want to be appreciated. And underneath that question is something heavier. It's the fear of rejection. It's that little whisper that says, if she really loved me, wouldn't she notice? Wouldn't she appreciate me more? I worked with a client who was carrying this exact weight. He would get up early, was very successful. He would go to work, he would handle the bills, helped with the kids' teams, and even helped with things around the house that he thought would help. But when his wife did not respond with the gratitude or the affection that he was hoping for, he spiraled into frustration. And it came out in a really predictable way. He didn't talk about it. He told himself, fine, then I just don't care. So instead, the disappointment stacked up until it spilled over. When his wife did ask for help or seemed irritated that she had to ask, that's when he'd snap. Because in his mind, he was already helping. He was already working hard. And then her asking just felt like she was ignoring everything that he was doing. That's the reality for a lot of men. The blow-ups aren't really about the request in that moment. They're about the months and years of feeling unseen and unappreciated. And if I'm honest, I've seen this dynamic in my own life too. It's easy to fall into that, I do this, you do that mindset. And it feels fair, but really, we're describing something transactional. And it leaves both people feeling unseen and unheard. That thought, she should notice, is one of the biggest setups for resentment in your marriage. Because here's what happens. You wait, you hope, you do more, you push harder, and when she doesn't respond in the way that you need, and instead of saying something, you tell yourself stories about what it means, like she doesn't care, or I'm not enough, or I'll never get this right. Sometimes you carry that disappointment silently. Other times it leaks out as anger. But either way, the resentment is there and it's eating at the relationship. This is what I want to talk about today: unspoken expectations. Why they're so destructive, how they're showing up in your relationship, and what you can do instead. Unspoken expectations are one of the fastest ways to create distance in your marriage. Because when you don't say what you need, you start keeping score. And that sounds a lot like, I work all day, I provide for this family, I handle this house, I help out with what I can, and she still doesn't see it. And that mindset makes your relationship transactional. I do this, you do that. And when you live in that cycle, every interaction becomes about justice instead of mercy, about fairness instead of connection. And let's be honest, this often bleeds over into the physical side of the relationship. Many men tell themselves, if I do this, if I work hard, if I help out, then I deserve sex. And it becomes part of your scorecard. But intimacy does not work like that. You cannot trade chores or paychecks or acts of service for connection in the bedroom. When you try, it creates pressure resentment, and a dynamic that feels more like a business deal than a marriage. And here's the deeper problem. It puts an impossible burden on her shoulders. When you are asking her to notice and to validate and to make you feel good about yourself, you're asking her to make you feel happy. And that is not her job. When your happiness depends on her noticing, you've set yourself up for a situation where she can never win. And that's when resentment builds and you start to tell yourself stories about how much she doesn't care, or that she doesn't love you, or that you are not enough. Those stories cut deep. They activate that fear of rejection and old wounds that say you're not worthy unless someone else sees you. So you do more, hoping that this time she'll notice. And when she doesn't, the guilt sets in. Why do I keep needing this? Why can't I just be satisfied? What's wrong with me that this bothers me so much? That guilt piles on top of the resentment, and you feel bad for wanting more, and you feel bad for being upset, and then you feel bad for blowing up when the pressure finally gets too heavy. And that becomes a cycle you can't seem to break. So you either stay quiet and struggle silently, carrying the weight until you're exhausted, or you blow up, angry and defensive, snapping when she asks for help. Because in your mind, she's ignoring all the effort you've already put in. Either way, the unspoken expectations are in the driver's seat, and the connection between you two keeps eroding. When you're stuck in unspoken expectations, it usually goes one of two ways. The first is silence. You don't bring it up because you don't want to start another fight. And you tell yourself you should just let it go. But you don't really let it go. You do carry it. And day after day, the disappointment builds. And even if you never say a word, she can feel the distance. The second way it plays out is anger. You hold it all in until you just can't anymore, and then it just comes out sideways. You snap when she asks for help, or you shut down when she's upset. Because in your mind, you've already given so much. And when this goes on long enough, you end up living like roommates, and you only talk about surface level things like the schedule or the bills or the kids' activity or work, but not much else, and certainly not the deep connecting conversations. When you do try to go deeper, the conversations often turn tense, and then there's blame and defensiveness and criticism, and then neither of you feels heard, and neither of you feels safe to really open up, which makes it even more impossible to connect. So you simply avoid it. You stay on the surface and you keep things transactional, and you hope that maybe the tension will fade on its own. But you have to know by now that it doesn't. The resentment keeps simmering, and the distance between you keeps getting wider. At the heart of all of it, those unspoken expectations are still running the show. You are still waiting for her to notice. You are still waiting for her to step in, for her to meet you where you are. And the longer you wait, the more invisible you feel. Now, here's something really important that we need to recognize. You're not the only one with unspoken expectations. She has them too. She may expect that you notice when she's stressed without her saying a word. She may hope that you'll step in on your own or understand what's bothering her without her having to spell it out. And when you don't, she feels the exact same sting you do. She tells herself her own stories, like that you don't care, that you're not paying attention, and that she's on her own here. That's why unspoken expectations are so toxic. They run on both sides, both of you wanting to be noticed, both of you carrying disappointment, both of you silently keeping score. And without realizing it, the two of you are reinforcing the same cycle: distance, resentment, silence, and blow-ups. But here's the good news. Because this dynamic is happening on both sides, it only takes one of you to start changing the pattern. When you stop waiting, when you stop resenting and start bringing your needs into the open, everything can begin to shift. Here's the shift that you have to make. You have to stop waiting for her to make you happy. Because when your value depends on her noticing or her appreciating or her validating, you've given her all the power over how you feel about yourself. And that's not only an impossible weight for her to carry, it's disempowering to you. It leaves you stuck and powerless and always at the mercy of how she responds or doesn't respond. It doesn't mean you don't want her love, her appreciation, or her respect. Of course you do. Every man does. But those things cannot be the source of your worth. They cannot be the thing you're depending on to feel good enough. Because the truth is, if you don't believe you're enough right now, no amount of her noticing will fix that. Even if she said all the right words, you probably wouldn't believe them. You'd dismiss them, or you'd think that she was just saying it to keep the peace. That's why the waiting, the hoping, and the scorekeeping will never work. It keeps you resentful, and it keeps you disconnected, and it keeps you small. But when you stop outsourcing your worth and start owning it yourself, something powerful happens. The tension begins to ease. You stop reacting to every moment like it's proof that you don't matter. You show up calmer, steadier, and clearer. And she feels that. She feels the shift in your energy, the confidence in your presence, the safety of knowing you're not handing her the impossible job of keeping you happy. That's when conversations get easier. That's when the defensiveness begins to soften. That's when the space for intimacy and connection starts to reopen. The shift is choosing to own your value instead of outsourcing it. To step into clarity instead of silence. Stop waiting for her to make the move and start creating the kind of relationship that you want. If unspoken expectations are a trap and waiting to be noticed only leads to resentment, then what's the alternative? A few weeks ago, I introduced you to my framework, a clear ask. I'm going to tell you about it again today. So instead of holding it all in, instead of silently hoping that she notices, you bring it into the open. And here's how. It's an acronym, CLEAR. C, state a clear need. Say what you actually want. Don't hint, don't imply, just be clear. L, lay out a time. When would you like it? Be specific so there's no guessing. E, explain why. Share why it matters to you, not as a demand, but as an insight into your world. A, ask plainly. Put it on the table without dressing it up or hoping that she will guess. R, responsibility. Take ownership of voicing the need instead of waiting for her to figure it out. So this is really clear. Here's what doesn't work. You come home worn out and think, she should see how tired I am. She should just know to give me space. You don't say anything, but when she asks for help, you snap. Or maybe you say something vague like, I need a break, but you don't explain what you mean or when. And she's left guessing, and you become frustrated, and nothing changes. Now compare that to a clear ask. Hey, I've had a long week, and I'd really like to have some downtime on Saturday morning. Can we plan for me to have a couple hours to myself before we dive into the weekend stuff? That's direct, it's respectful, and clear. She doesn't have to guess. You're not stuck in silence waiting for her to notice. You've put it out there in a way that she can actually respond to. It's going to feel awkward at first, but it's the difference between living in resentment and building real connection. Here's what I want you to take from today. Unspoken expectations are a setup for resentment. They keep you waiting. They keep you scorekeeping. And they keep you silently telling yourself stories that only make you feel more rejected. It does not have to stay this way. When you stop outsourcing your worth to whether she notices you or not, when you step out of silence and start making clear asks, you create a space for connection to come back. It won't always be easy. It won't always go perfectly. But it is way better than living like roommates and keeping score and blowing up about all the wrong things. If this resonates, you can learn more about the work that I do with men to break this cycle and to build connection on my website, elisastoddard.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.